Welcome to The Full Experience, a show where we get the flavor of an entire television series by watching the first, ultimate, lowest, and last episode. We are in the middle of watching MASH. We watched the first episode, the pilot. We watched the ultimate episode, the highest ranked one, season 3, episode 24, Abyssinia Henry. This week, it's time to get down into the lowest ranked episode. According to IMDb, it's season 4, episode 18, Hawkeye, which first aired January 13th, 1976. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Hey, Tom, I'm fresh off the heels of watching Hawkeye, and if there's one thing I can tell you, it's that 251 episodes is a lot of episodes of MASH, and they had to come out every week without fail. Boy, what I would give to be a fly on the wall and hear the pitch on this one. What was your opinion?
So yeah, anybody who didn't watch it, this is often billed as just Alan Alda talking for an entire episode. It is the premise is Hawkeye is driving back from leave or something. I don't really recall. I think they even said, but I don't recall. And some kids run out of the road, and he unnecessarily wrecks his Jeep, from what I could tell. The kids were running very slowly. I feel like he could have stopped without wrecking his Jeep.
Well, we wouldn't know because whatever happened off screen.
Yeah. Then he stumbles into the house of where the kids live, bleeding a little bit, and then very clearly tells us, well, you know, medically speaking, it doesn't matter if you go to sleep when you have a concussion. But nevertheless, we're going to base the premise of this entire episode on the idea that I shouldn't go to sleep for fear of not waking up because I have a concussion. And then Alan Alda does a stand-up routine where he pretends that the other people around him are interested in everything he has to say for the next half hour. In my notes, Brian, I wrote, man, this really plays to me like a self-obsessed guy being selfish.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I had very little time because I watched it right before the program, but I carved out extra time. If we started 2 minutes late, it's because I was trying to find out, was this a passion project for Alan Alda? I thought that he got his hooks into stuff and made it preachy like later than this. It turns out, no, it was written by the two other guys, and then it made a little bit more sense. I am convinced that they wrote it just figuring Alan Alda could sell it. And the way it read to me was a one-man show in a black box theater with exactly 5 people, none of whom were having a good time, except instead of them not having a good time, the excuse is they don't speak English. And the justification of why we get this kind of rambling stream of consciousness thing is not there. Maybe at the time people were hungry for backstories. Maybe in the writer's room, they just had this giant black box. And they're like, oh, well, we talk, you know, we can only do these gags so many times. But Alan Alda, the very first episode, we remarked how he was straight vaudeville. Alan Alda can sell a one-man show. He can do a one-man show. He was such a one-man show that he crowded out his sidekick and chased him off the show, you know?
By all accounts, yeah.
So therefore, logic brain engaged, the only reason that this was so stilted, forced, weird, I began to engage in this, I began to pay attention to how long of a stretch was clearly memorized that they didn't have to rely on a cut. And dude memorized all the scripts, memorized all these eye motions to sell all the stuff, but there was no heart, energy, passion, no humor, no twinkle in the eye. He did not appear to be having fun selling this fever dream of a one-man show that was written and handed to him. And I wish I could point to anything more than vibes on this, but it just seemed like Alan Alda was not having fun doing what by all accounts should be a dream come true of an episode. Nothing but him and his star power and his charm and his charisma. I just think he was being asked to sell comedic bits that he didn't love himself. And he he showed up and did it. Favorite part, by the way, is like, oh, good, there's radar. Fade out. Don't have to pay radar this week.
That helps, actually. That makes me feel a little better about this episode, which I really didn't like, because I didn't really snap to the fact that Alan Alda was possibly, just executing and not doing this, which makes sense.
And by the way, it sounds Scooper Girl in the chat is saying it was directed by him.
It was directed by Larry Gelbart, according to
got it. Directed by good. Okay,
and
good.
Written
So
by
I'm
Larry Gelbart.
I'm on to something.
Yep. Also, there were 5 other people in this episode. Everyone talks about like, oh, it's an episode with just Hawkeye. It's like, yeah. And the 5 other people, including the guy who was actually played by a Korean, Philip Ahn, the father, speaking passable Korean. A little weird accent, but I could understand him. And they gave him the kinds of lines that you might expect, which is like, okay, maybe, have this, or, he's not good with spicy food. Why would you not have played into that more? In fact, in Abyssinia Henry, I thought it was nice that when Hawkeye takes a drink from one of the people at the bar, he says, "Kamsahamnida" to them, which is Korean for thank you. I'm like, oh, Hawkeye is someone who's like made an effort to, learn the basics, right? And use them. You don't see any of that in this episode. He's just a guy like wandering around raving, and apparently the family just lets him, which actually may be true because like he's a military person and they're like, maybe best to just let the military person do whatever they're doing to do as long as they don't harm us. But man, that family was just treated like furniture and I didn't like it.
So that brings me to another aspect that I found interesting, which is like the reason we have a laugh track on this show is for the power of social proof, the ability to instantly communicate. They're laughing, you can laugh along with it, you could smile. So we have this dramedy where they inject fake laughter that was not there just so everybody knows the social cues. But they're doing that on top of this episode where every person in screen is there to sell the fact that none of this is landing with them. Their job as actors was to radiate, I'm not getting this. And then as a result, I was at home thinking, I'm not getting this. And I wonder how much of it was essentially an inverted laugh track that drowned out the actual laugh track.
Yeah. I would have preferred them to act a little disturbed. But instead,
or have any character or
instead they were directed to just walk around like zombies and act as if nothing was happening, and be nice to the American soldier and give him food, which is fine. But yeah, I don't know, man. It really rubbed me the wrong way, especially when he's like grabbing the grandfather's thumb at the end and talking about like seriously, like that's just rude. Like I don't know that Hawkeye would act that way. I mean, okay, he's got a head injury, so maybe he's acting out of his skull, literally. But yeah, it was a bad script. It was a bad premise. It was bad execution.
I actually am not going to say it was even a bad premise because I can picture this doing well. Like imagine insert brilliant actor who can do anything here, and I can see a scene where it's like, oh, is this getting serious? And then, he acts his way through snapping to and entering a delicious fugue state that is beyond my ken,
No, I can see that. Like, premise may be the wrong word then because it's a bad setup in that they're like, what we want to happen is Hawkeye wander around raving for a half hour and nobody pay any attention to him. Whereas the premise is Hawkeye has a head injury and decides he has to keep himself awake and is around people who don't speak the same language as him. Yeah, it could have been a great premise if they had executed it differently.
Yeah, and I don't know. I want to be generous and say, I'm not going to say he was a bad actor just because I could picture somebody actually landing all that, but it wouldn't be me, and it wasn't Alan Alda. I don't know who it would be, and we know Alan Alda can't be funny, like I was saying. But anyway,
the other two things, those are some big onions. Did you notice? Like, there's this family who's supposed to be like war torn. Well, first of all, they send their daughter through an active war zone. 20 miles. They're like, oh, it's 20 miles south of here. Like,
and he even mentions the landmines.
Yeah, go run through the landmines, little girl. And then they had like 12 huge onions, which I don't know. Maybe they're growing onions out the landmines.
Okay, if we were so bored, we started picking apart the set. My favorite moment was when the dialogue says, "Oh, thank you for the soup. But I can't have it because of the microbes." Immediately, Brian's eyes look over at the boiling cauldron. So the water's boiling, at which point Brian notices, except for that steam's not coming out of the cauldron, it's coming from a vent behind the cauldron where production set it up, because it's not even lined up with the cauldron. I was like,
That's great. And I'm really glad we ended with an eating dog joke at the end. That's awesome.
It was best I could tell, the only joke. The only joke with a setup and a payoff was, where's the dog? Woo! Which again, grading on a curve, Tom, I can legitimately say it was the best joke of the entire episode.
It's sad to say that may be true. I haven't liked most of these episodes.
You said it, Tom.
Here's the thing, though. When the opening scene started of Hawkeye, episode 18 or 19, depending on, because they break them up in syndication differently, I still get nostalgic. I still have a good feeling of like, MASH. I really enjoyed watching MASH both in the evenings on regular TV, but also like at 10:30 after the news on Channel 2. It was an important thing for me to do, and I enjoyed watching it, and it landed differently with me then than it does now. So it hasn't changed my feeling, my emotion around the show, even though I haven't really liked a lot of these episodes.
Yep.
Or any of them.
Yep.
So, should we bring in Amos or not? Yep. Dare we?
You know what? Unlike Hawkeye, we're going to have more than one voice in this.
Yeah. and we're all speaking the same language as far as I know. Amos, did you watch Hawkeye?
I did.
And?
I really hated this episode. Like, more than... It didn't just bring back the thoughts of when I was little and the only thing I could watch was MASH, because that's what my grandpa was watching on our black and white TV. It was like it was painful to watch this episode, but at the end of it, I actually enjoyed it. Like, I don't know why.
What turned you around?
I think it was the end where Hawkeye comes back to the family. And
that was a good move. That's worth pointing out. You're right.
You know, gives the toys,
shows gratitude.
And,
also establishes that he's not deranged anymore.
Right.
Everything up until that point in this episode was just so awful. The accident that happens off screen where the Jeep is like perfectly lined up 45 degrees off the road and 90 degrees on its side.
And his bag is just laying there, neatly tucked in by a PA.
My bag.
Nothing spilled. There's no obvious signs of trauma anywhere other than the vague redness, of his face. And then they came out with the dog joke, and I was just like, "Oh, you just messed it up. I don't like it anymore." But yeah, I think the only redeeming quality about this entire episode was the fact that he, as a armed forces member myself, going back and thanking the family for helping you, even when they kind of barely did and didn't do so willingly, was a classic move. That was it. That's all I got.
Yeah, I didn't think about the aspect of your personal experience coloring that vibe, and the show in general as well.
Luckily, the Korea that I know is so far removed from the Korea portrayed in this that it's basically not even the same country. So,
yeah. I was trying to figure that part out too. Like, how did he get 20 miles north of Huizhangbu, which is already north of Seoul? Like, he's basically at the DMZ at that point, or what would become the DMZ.
Right. 38th parallel.
Yeah.
That and the girl that ran off, she managed to make it 20 miles there and 20 miles back, presumably on foot in
20 minutes,
in 28 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the total run time, I mean, I think if you time it, it's less than 20 minutes.
Right to KTX, you know.
Yeah, she hit the subway apparently.
Yeah. The Metro line. Yeah. Sounds like we're all basically on one or more of the same pages here.
I don't know that this is the lowest episode of MASH, but I know it is a contender, having not seen all the others.
Yeah, there's the one with the psychiatrist that has varying opinions. Some people think it's brilliant. It's shot faux documentary style. Some people hate that one. We're going to be jumping all the way to the end. We've only seen episodes from the first 4 seasons. We've never seen BJ, who arrives at the beginning of season 4, and no one else from the 407th was in this episode. We haven't seen Winchester, who comes after Frank Burns leaves. We really haven't seen Klinger, except for that one brief scene when Henry said goodbye. But I assume we'll see all of them in the last episode, season 11, episode 16, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. It is a supersized episode, Brian.
Tom, I don't want to say that the full experience has been disproven, but I will say that MASH has proven to be testing our thesis.
Well, I think what I've been thinking is this formula, first, ultimate, lowest, last, has a problem for longer running shows, particularly where the more enjoyable sections of the series may not be good or bad, right? It may be that, the ultimate episode doesn't play well because it had to be seen in context. We run into that with other series. And that if you've got 11 seasons, you're missing out on a lot of, to use a sports metaphor, you're missing out on a lot of base hits, even if they're not home runs.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of what might be the essence of the show gets lost in the.
Yeah. So full experience is not great at measuring the quality of longevity, I suppose you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. All right.
I mean, I really, to be honest, here's what I don't want to do, Tom. Is I don't want to just pile on this episode. I don't want to pile on everything we've seen of MASH, but what's been your favorite hilarious laugh out loud moment so far in all of MASH? The most watched, beloved comedy of the 1970s.
Hawkeye trying to get Lieutenant Dish to be the person that goes to Tokyo.
Yeah. I guess.
Randomly showing up in the showers. Yeah.
Fully naked.
I guess.
Halfway through the
pilot was my favorite episode of the 3 we've watched. Because Abyssinia Henry was entirely that last scene is the favorite scene we've watched. It's not a funny scene, but that scene in Abyssinia Henry, definitely the biggest scene, and definitely points us towards the quality that MASH had, that it could make you care about the characters. I think Scooper Nova Girl was saying it in the chat too. Like, the reason this is a terrible episode of MASH is, in her words, what makes MASH work is the relationships between the characters, and you don't get that at all in this episode. All right. Well, we will see the relationships between characters we haven't even met yet next week when we watch the last episode, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. 11/16, season 11, episode 16.
No, I just realized this is going to be exactly like the ultimate episode where it's like it's a going away party for a bunch of people I never got to meet.
Yeah, I know. Well, at least you got to meet Hawkeye a lot.
I got to meet Hawkeye's backstory as no sold in a one-man show.
If you would like to know what we're going to watch after MASH, which, by the way, as I say that, I realize realize is not going to be after MASH, the series, the spinoff series, which you can't even find on streaming. Anyway, we will be talking about that in our after talk. So get that if you're a patron at patreon.com/Cordkillers. That does it for us. Until next week, we give you the full experience. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.